A few weeks ago, shortly after my husband and I had fallen asleep, we heard these breathless gasps coming from the bedroom of our oldest child, Emmett. We ran to discover that he was struggling to breathe, and in that moment I felt paralyzed with fear. I wanted to pretend this was just a nightmare and it would be over as soon as I woke up. As my heart was racing, my mind was fluctuating between begging God, help him, and then hearing myself say, I cannot do this. I realized in that moment I could have all the faith in the world in God, but without taking action, it wouldn't matter. God needed me to have faith in myself just as much as I needed to have faith in God. So in the midst of the hysteria, because I have 2 other children and a husband, I don't know how I did it, but I did what needed to be done, and within moments we were on our way to the hospital and he was being treated. In the waiting room, I was thinking about what had happened, and I was surprised about how much fear I felt in the moment. I thought I would feel powerful, and instead I felt utterly powerless. My story is not unique. Although the details may differ, most parents at one time or another have this terrifying experience with their children. And what I expected is what I think most people expect, that my reaction would be automatic and effortless. We never expect that we will have to overcome the circumstances and we'll have to overcome our fears towards them as well. The transformation of our fears in those moments of complete difficulty is the very definition of faith. Imagine how Abraham must have felt as he prepared to sacrifice his son Isaac. In Genesis 22, God commands Abraham, take your favorite son, your loved Isaac, and offer him on the altar. The Torah sees this command as the ultimate test of Abraham's faith. If Abraham follows God's command and overrides all of his human consciousness, then he's a believer. If he disobeys, well, then he's not. We all know the story. He saddles his ass, he takes his son and his 2 servants, and he prepares to sacrifice him on the altar. He does not say a word. But I imagine in that moment, Abraham had plenty of questions. Why would God make me do this? What kind of God is this? Will I actually be able to kill my own flesh and blood? Can I really do this? I think about Abraham and all the fear and trepidation he must have felt. He could have protested along the way. God had already told him in Genesis 12 that he would become the leader of the nations. He knew his destiny. What need was there to sacrifice his son? Yet he's silent and he's obedient, and he takes his son, he places him on the altar, and in that last moment, God provides a ram, and Isaac is saved. Everyone thinks that this is the end of the story, case closed, and we're done. But there's a surprising twist. An angel calls out to Abraham a second time from heaven and basically reiterates Abraham's entire destiny, which is surprising. He tells him what he already knows. The angel says, I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars of the heaven and sands of the seashore, and all the nations shall be blessed by you. Seems repetitive. Abraham already knew about his future. Why would God need to tell him yet again? Here's a theory. Perhaps it was through this harrowing experience that Abraham truly discovered his own faith. He discovered that he could be full of fear, tremendous fear, and yet still go on. Maybe that's the secret. God was not testing Abraham's faith, as all the commentators suggest in the Bible. Rather, the binding of Isaac was to teach Abraham that he had internal faith, the capacity to go on even in the worst of circumstances. That's when Abraham became a true leader, when he realized inside of him that he had God. He had that divine spirit, that power to go on when he was completely filled with fear and with doubt. There's a famous medieval Jewish story of a boat of passengers and a crew that were besieged by plague and strife. And the captain and all the passengers were thrown to this uninhabited place. Just a few remained alive. And so they gathered their strength. One man and his wife and 2 sons tried to make the journey, but along the way his wife fainted. And he grabbed her, and he carried her until, exhausted, they both collapsed. When the man regained his consciousness, he looked over, and he saw that his wife and his 2 sons were dead. And from the depths of his sorrow, he rose to his feet and he said, God in heaven, my wife and my children are dead. What do I have left? I cannot go on. And then he gathered earth and leaves and buried his wife and his children. He gathered all his strength. He stood up. And he walked on to find a new place. What made this ordinary, nameless man extraordinary is in tremendous pain and tremendous grief. When he was sure he could not go on, he even told God he couldn't. He discovered he could. In the Jewish tradition, we usually read Psalm 23 at a funeral. It begins, Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Yea, though I walk. It emphasizes to the mourner to walk on, even in the face of complete grief. It seems all too often after tragedy, we become paralyzed emotionally and spiritually. Our faith has been tested, our will has been weakened, and our spirit is so dim. But in those moments, as difficult as they are, we have the possibility of discovering our true greatness, that we can go on even when we think we cannot, that we are courageous, we are brave, and we are strong, and we are powerful. We are made in God's image, and God designed us, and we are exactly the way God envisioned. Then, and only then, we will realize we have found an even greater faith both in God, but more importantly in ourselves. I know it's true. For when my husband and I walked out of the hospital hours later holding our son's hands, we had found a new faith in God. We had found a new faith in each other. And we had found a new faith in ourselves.